Good morning. We're waiting for Bob DiCarlo to hop on as the Ag Committee representative. So I'm gonna give him a few more minutes because I know he's very busy right now. He was gonna update us on the overlay. Doug, did you want to, is there any other
Yeah, I can
outstanding
do an
items you
update
could?
on it. Kim, do you have that map that we discussed in the Ag Committee, one with the red circle?
The red circle.
That might be the easiest thing to show. So just let me kind of give you a little historical perspective while we're kind of waiting for Bob. So the Ag Committee, we had talked about the creation of potentially an agriculture protection overlay district. Remember, when we created the agriculture enhancement plan in 2016, we created a strategic farmland protection area that essentially is this map over here to Tom's left for those of you that are in the room. Everything inside of the red heavy line essentially is the agriculture enhancement plan, or the agriculture strategic protection farmland area. I'm sorry, said that wrong. So that was in the agriculture enhancement plan that was adopted by the town board in December of 2016. One of the challenges with the agriculture enhancement plan, specifically the strategic farmland protection area, is it never changed the zoning. It never, even though it was called a strategic farmland protection area, there are no limitations relative to what could or could not be done. It's essentially an area that's highlighted by a red marker that says, hey, these parcels tend to be prime soils of statewide importance. It tends to be where our larger farming operations are. And these are areas that we've identified where strategic farming or farming in general, agriculture in general, is good for the region and for the town of Canandaigua. And it's also those areas that include our PDRs, our protection and development right parcels, where we've been extinguishing development rights for parcels, specifically in the Paddleford Brook Greenway, which is also further highlighted in this inside the red, the big red outline, not the one on the screen, but the big outside boundaries. For those of you on the screen, it's the red parcel that follows the municipal boundaries, not the hand-drawn red circle. There's the one that I'm talking about. And then the green area is the Paddleford Brook Greenway, which is the 10,800 acres of the Paddleford Brook Greenway plan that was also adopted by the town board in 2015. And that's some of our largest farming operations there. And again, it's an area that we focused on our PDR applications. So the Ag Committee, maybe a year or two ago, started talking about maybe putting some more teeth into the zoning relative to protection of the strategic farmland protection area. And there's been quite a bit of conversation about, are you, and if Bob gets here, just give me a heads up or whatever, but there's been quite a bit of conversation about, you know, are you essentially taking away a private owner's land rights by protection of that area, especially in an area as large as the strategic farmland protection area, given it's so broad and encompasses so much of the town. So, do you need some water? Need some water?
I just,
You need a cough drop? I can get you some water.
We have some of those short
Yeah,
bottles.
I'm gonna
fine now.
You okay?
I'll bring
Okay.
you one just in case.
So the strategic farmland protection area, so there was this conversation back and forth. It came to the ordinance committee, and there really wasn't a lot of support, I think is fair to say, for enacting broad legislation, zoning restrictions for that entire strategic farmland protection area, and specifically limiting what a landowner could do or could not do in terms of, for instance, selling off to a developer, even though it is our farmland protection area. So the Ag Committee had continued conversation about how could that be further redefined and what could we do specifically to look to protect the area of the town of Canandaigua with prime farmland, prime soils. And so the map that's actually on the screen that Kim pulled up for us, that red hand-drawn circle, you see the green parcels there. Those are the active soil classifications as prime farmland by both New York State Department of Ag and Markets. It's what it's the national, I can't think of the abbreviation for it. It's
The soil types are come from the USDA,
yes,
but
thank you.
Ag and Markets classifies the top two types. It's prime farmland and then soil types that are specific to certain states. So soils of statewide importance as being the most important soils to protect. And then, yeah, all the ones that are shown are considered active farmland as of 2016 when the plan was done.
But specifically what we're looking at is the area inside that red circle. So there was continued conversation with the Ag Committee about what it might look like. Was he here? No. There was continued conversation with the Ag Committee about what could the Ag Committee do, at least as a starting point, or request the town board to do as a starting point to further protect those prime farmlands specifically. Because if we're going to convert from growing agricultural products to growing houses in that area, that once that soil's gone, it's gone, right? And that's the prime farmland, yields the best crops, has the greatest yield of return. You know, what could we do? So there was a lot of conversation about maybe what the Ag Committee recommends is that the town board consider adopting town code that would ask the town board to further consider, and the town board to be involved in the consideration of any approval for extension of water or sewer in that area designated as prime farmland. And so there was a lot of conversation about what would that look like and how could you go about it, and what, specifically what area. So at the last meeting, we really honed in on the area from County Road 30 south to Risser Road north, essentially north of Rosier, north of Rosier, to south of County Road 30, west of New York State Route 21, and east of the municipal boundary, that is in the strategic farmland protection area, and also 7 acres or more, meaning that it has the agriculture exemption per New York State Ag and Markets, the assessor type thing. So that's essentially the area that we've highlighted there in that hand-drawn circle. So what we're talking about is a new agriculture protection overlay district, and this is a very simple law. I've actually been working on it. It's about a page and a half, but essentially it defines that area that I just described as south of County Road 30. Oh, Bob's here, I think. Bob, you want to jump in?
Hi, Bob.
Just kind of giving...
Sorry about that. I couldn't locate the Zoom info, and I finally tracked it down. So I apologize for being late.
Thanks for coming, Bob. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
So Doug
So
was-
Bob, I was just giving an overview of kind of where we got to here and talking about specifically the area, kind of the history on what we took to the ordinance committee before, and then the most recent version being essentially this area, south of County Road 30, north of Rosier Road, this area in the red circle, and the limitations relative to utilities essentially. So Bob, why don't you take it away from there to continue the conversations?
Okay. So thanks for having me today. The reason we concentrated in that area, I don't know too much of what Doug's filled you in on so far. As the land was rated for soil quality, the town that was the better soils and also larger parcels. We also concentrated in that area because some of the other areas already in PDR, like Paddleford Brook Greenway area, already has quite a bit of protection on it. So we thought that we'd concentrate it a little bit more so that we didn't have as broad of an area, and we had an area that was possibly at a little bit more risk for development. And as far as the strategy of the overlay, I couldn't really get behind anything that really took away any property owner rights. I think if someone owns their land, they should be able to do what they want to do within the zoning regulations. But we would like to put some more thought or some restriction on the utilities, because that should help slow down the creep of development, but it's also not going to necessarily stop anybody.
Yeah, Bob, if I could just help you out here. So there's two main components now that we've described the area that this proposed local law that's overlaid to in that area that's basically in red. And it's quite simply relates to new infrastructure improvements. Any decision to expand public water or sewer lines should consider limiting, minimizing, or mitigation of the expansion of water or sewer services to avoid those areas in the agriculture protection overlay district. Again, being that area specifically in the red. And B, any expansion of publicly owned water or sewer lines in the agriculture protection overlay district must be approved by the town board of the town of Canandaigua. Meaning, if a developer comes in and wants to subdivide and create a subdivision in that red circle, the planning board absolutely has the authority to grant that subdivision. Our town code says if it's 4 lots or more, it must have public sewer, meaning, take that a step further, before the planning board could grant that subdivision for a major subdivision, the town board would have to authorize the expansion of the sewer. So it is an extra step. So it makes the town board have a conscious decision in the process of subdivision, specifically in that area in the red where that prime farmland is. It doesn't take anybody's rights away for doing it. It just says the town board has to agree that the water or sewer should be expanded to allow for that subdivision in that area.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
The first one is just, do we know why this area was not originally included in the Paddleford Brook Greenway? Is it just because it's not including Paddleford Brook, or?
So the Paddleford Brook Greenway, Adeline, I actually wrote that document myself. That document was our first attempt at the strategic farmland protection area. And we were really focused on the largest of the farming operations, and specifically the Paddleford Brook watershed is how that all came about originally. So this area was just to the south of that and included these prime, essentially these prime farmlands that then got picked up when the next year, the very following year, wasn't even a full year later, when we did the agriculture enhancement plan.
Yeah, okay. And then the second question I had is basically just, from my knowledge, being a newer town board member. So I'm thinking of the Pierce Brook subdivision, for example, when I assume that area does not currently have any sewer in the Pierce Brook subdivision. So what happens with that when they decided to build that there? Is the planning board just approving them for water and sewer as they're going through the planning? Is that how that's currently working?
So you want me to take that? So the Pierce Brook subdivision is, so it's on the east side of State Route 21. So it would not be impacted because this boundary is west side of Route 21. But let's hypothetically say that that didn't factor in. The Pierce Brook subdivision, that parcel's been owned by that developer for 15 plus years.
Yeah.
And that is actually already, the parcel, most of it is already in an Ontario County sewer district. So the obviously, as they factored in that, but hypothetically, say that the developer wanted to extend to the other side of the road, being the west side of Route 21 in some of that farmland there. What this would say is it wouldn't prohibit the planning board from granting that approval as long as the town board has said, yes, you can run the sewer line over there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So there's a lot of the purple area, which is needs to be drained, I guess, in order to be prime farmland. So by what you're saying, that means that a developer could come in and purchase that drain, the area that needed to be drained, and would have free reign over developing it.
Well, I mean, that's no different than anywhere in the town currently. So a lot of the area in that purplish bluish color,
Mhm.
prime farmland if drained, a lot of those, especially in the Paddleford Brook Greenway on the north end of the town, are our largest farming operations. And they have invested, a lot of our farms, Bob, jump in here, please, but a lot of those have invested a lot of money in drain tiles, and they also, so it is prime farmland. And additionally, they have, quite a few of those have already entered into our PDR program with us. But hypothetically, if somebody wanted to develop one of those parcels, could they do it? Yes.
And the green area within the manually circled area, those are already parcels that are being farmed, correct? Because some of it is no, some is no. Okay.
I think at the very beginning, when you were outlining this, I wasn't following it very well. You had mentioned like 10,000 acres.
The
It-
Paddleford Brook Greenway, the area in the green is 10,000
There's
acres.
that
Okay.
pale green line near the top, everything inside of that.
Got it. Thanks.
And what is restricting development at this point is not so much the regulations as the cost.
There's nothing, right? There's nothing really restricting it. And
But
it's,
the cost, what you're saying is, so anything above 4 units has to have sewer.
anything above 4 units currently has to. I'll give you a perfect example, and I've used this before, is the Taylor Farm is on Canandaigua Farmington Town Line Road. It's 300 and some odd acres. There's sewer across the street. It's in the strategic farmland protection area, and it's in the Paddleford Brook Greenway. Could they come in and do a conservation subdivision? Yes.
But practically speaking, what limits the development is going to be cost.
Sewer predominantly is a factor, obviously, for development and cost. And so that is one of the things this would do, is it would say, at least, okay, there is water and sewer in the area. Obviously, we have sewer here. So this area in the green is just to the west of this area here, where you have all this prime farmland. Before additional sewer lines are expanded to the west in the town, that at least the town board would have to say yes, whether it's a developer doing it or the town doing it.
And does the developer pick up the cost of sewer?
The developer does as part of the subdivision. Yes, they would install that generally.
So my section of Middle Cheshire, where there's sewer to the north and sewer to the south, but none where I am,
It's because there's no developer, right?
would discourage a developer from developing to the cost of having to put sewer.
Right. Well, and also the grade in that particular area, I think that the grade is higher, right? So that means that there's lift or pump stations that have to be installed, and those are substantially more expensive than gravity lines.
Okay.
Is the Order Dane property designated as farmland?
There is
They own all
a,
the way up to Middle Cheshire.
yeah, it's 100, yeah, they do. There's about 60 acres that is current active farmland
Mhm.
of that 100 off of Foster, on the south side of Foster there. There is sewer there. It is, I think, AR2. I'm not so sure if it's in the, I'd have to look. I don't know if it's in the protection
I'm
area. or
trying to
not,
figure
so.
out if it is.
Do we still have Bob? I
Bob,
just
are
can't
you
see
there?
him, so.
Yep, I'm there. Yep.
Bob, do you have any other updates you want to share related to what the ag committee has been working on? I know this is principally been it, but
Yeah, this has really been our main focus. We have had some discussion on solar, but nothing real specific on that. So hoping just to get a more finalized draft together on this with Doug and move ahead from there.
The discussion on solar has been more general. Is there any consensus or any, I mean, can you kind of give an update on that, or are you not prepared, not ready for that? Because Bob LaCourse is on, I see him on, and I know that he is very passionate about looking at our solar regs as it relates to farmland.
Yeah, but Bob and I have talked a bit about that. We don't have anything specific from the Ag Committee other than we do think the current language, correct me if I'm wrong at all, Doug, but basically it's that solar cannot go on any viable farmland or cause a loss of viable farmland, and that's kind of been our position at this point.
That's true. That is how it reads. Mhm.
You know, I do, besides development, solar is gonna be the next, or already is the next biggest risk of loss of farmland.
It is.
So it is something that we have to keep in mind, because depending on how much we do limit the ability for people to develop their land if they want to, solar will be the next thing that they would go to, and I can't blame them because the financial incentive is quite good. So just something we have to keep in mind of when we look at any of this, because there could be some unintended consequences of stopping development and then having to deal with a lot more solar the possibilities of solar development.
So would that eliminate solar development?
No.
No.
Mm-mm. No.
If the farmers are free, farmlands are free to have those solar farms on their
I
property.
wouldn't say that, no. So the current zoning that Bob is talking about is before the planning board is authorized to grant a special use permit for solar. So in order to do solar, the planning board has to issue a special use permit, but the code says before the planning board is authorized, it must find that it's not a loss of viable agricultural land. So then they refer it to the Ag Committee, the Ag Committee weighs in. And so like, we've had example of both ways. On Monks Road, there was an example where the Ag Committee actually found that the land, right, Bob, jump in here, that really wasn't suitable. And so it would not be a loss of viable agricultural land. And so they encouraged that. But we've also had it the other way where a developer was looking to actually take up a lot of prime farmland, actually prime classified soils for solar.
Okay, so how does the mandate from the state about going to all electric, how does that fit into the limitations that we currently have with solar farm development? How is that going to change it, or is it going to be something that we have to add on to the way we deal with issues like that on farmland?
Right, so I think those are all part of the conversations that are going to be ongoing. That's, I know Bob LaCourse is looking into that, and Bob DiCarlo with you know, the Ag Committee, they've got to be talking about that and everything. So when we originally did the solar law, the intent was to allow solar farms essentially in the scrublands on the edges of the farm fields and stuff. And I think that's generally been the position that we've taken. I was having a conversation with Chris Nadler about this just recently, and he said in some cases he feels like some of the stuff that he's read out of Albany was almost mirroring some of the stuff that we've done. But I know that Bob and Chuck and have had quite a few different conversations. I know that there's updates that need to be done to our law, but it's finding the balance. It's about finding the balance, right?
I understand that, yeah, and I agree.
Solar is often a way that the farmer can afford to be a farmer.
It's, right, yeah.
You know, like, was it Monks Road?
Sorry, yeah.
He was planting corn in prime if drained, but it was mostly eroding into Seneca Point Glen.
That's what the Ag Committee was saying. It was
Yeah, I
eroding,
mean,
it was
they-
eroding, it was causing problems, and they wouldn't want to farm it either.
So many times solar would be a blessing for a
It's-
farmer.
It would be typical in land that didn't really have a good use otherwise.
Except there's always somebody that's gonna come out and say, well, you're just taking away this farmland.
Well, yes.
Prime, if drained, is a real. Well, I don't know, it's a
Challenge.
difficult thing. Yeah, you can get something to grow on almost any land in town of Candido, but there's a vast array of difference, and there are many times when it's makes sense for the community, the landowner, to have solar.
But, so, from what I see in that red circle, there is a lot of farmland.
Mhm.
But I only know of a few large farmlands there. So is some of it these small farms that are struggling? And
Bob, why, can you talk to that? I mean, a lot of that, I think, is either you're directly involved or some of your neighboring farms are involved in that prime soil area.
I had trouble hearing for a few minutes and my audio wasn't very good, but one point I was gonna make was that quite often the what works well for the solar company and what would work well for a farm don't really fit too well together. Because I think there is a place for it, utilizing some of the poorer lands. But often that's not close to where they want it, and they tend to want it in one larger location. So hopefully there could be some type of compromise on some of these projects, because I do think there is a place for it in some of the poorer ground.
But Bob, I asked about the red circled area. I don't know if you can see it, but it's you know, I know the Knopf and the Miller Farm is in that area. Are there small struggling farmers in that area also that would be open to developers?
Developers or solar? Which are you talking?
No, I'm talking about development.
Okay.
That's what.
Probably, maybe not.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe not so much farmers, because right in that area, there's probably 3 of us or so that are working most of that land, but there are landowners, or maybe a couple retirement age farmers.
And
That-
that's what I'm wondering.
I would be
Their
I'd be
ability
concerned
to.
about land. You know, that might not have any exit strategy for their land or family or anything to eventually own that land. That puts it at more risk.
You talk about making money on their land. Sadly, the way to make money on their land is often to sell it to a developer.
And that's what I mean, you know, are we limiting
But
their
that's
ability to?
economics.
Yeah,
You
There's
go-
also
go big
pieces
or
that are-
go home.
but
There's leased land too that we have to think about, that's
Mm.
leased to
And I
farmers, so
understand
the I don't know, the stake
Well,
that the owner has.
That's what I'm describing, basically. Probably land that's being rented by
Right,
farmers
right.
right now that at risk of possibly not being rented.
I'm thinking, I was just saying to Sarah, that 30-acre parcel that's for sale is on Hickox.
Yep.
That's being leased, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's wide open.
It's got water on it.
But that's not in this area, I think.
And I'll tell you right now that
Oh, I don't.
the current listing price and most other land around is way above what any farmer is going to pay for it. So
Got it.
that's at risk.
Right, right.
so how do we mitigate that risk? You know, we have this two-edged sword. We want to protect farmland,
Adeline has her-
especially the prime farmland. But we also have some elderly farmers who at one point might want to make a profit or at least make enough money to be able to retire on by selling their farmland, and the probable buyer would be a developer. So how do we bridge that gap?
So let's talk about that in a second. So Adeline, I know, has a question or comment or something that's
Yeah, it's back. I was trying to interject about 5 minutes ago. It's back to the solar conversation. As we're consulting on the land for ag value, I would appreciate it if we could also have review by the scenic view shed committee as well for solar farms. I think that's another area that we need to keep track of as well, but guys can go back to where you were.
Adeline, do you mean putting something into the scenic view shed overlay that would limit solar? I'm just not sure.
I would like there to be a review when a new solar project's coming in to see if it's just like the ag committee's reviewing to see if it's prime farmland and agreeing if it makes sense or not. I'd like there to be a review if it's within the scenic view shed overlay as well, if it's makes sense to put it in.
Well,
that.
yeah, the planning board is required to do that as part of seeker.
Okay,
Yeah,
So they
that'll
would
kick
do
it
that.
in.
Considers that
Yeah.
too then.
And the
Um,
ECB would look at that, absolutely.
that's just making sure.
Yep,
Yep.
yep.
So Karen, that's the age old challenge. That's the age old question is where do you find the balance, right? So the area that we're talking about specifically here is trying to help protect, at least from development caused by the Chalicanategua or a developer for water and sewer expansion and protection of this specific area. The parcel, like the Hickox Road parcel, that's outside of this area, it is wide open for development, right? So that's where we have to look at other programs like the conservation stuff. I'm super excited that we have a new team lead for the conservation team to finally kick off, but that's where it's important to have these other programs also. Because this isn't going to prohibit or limit that, or even help the landowner, right? If there is some sort of conservation program where there's some sort of financial incentive for the owner of the land to sell off the development rights or put conservation, then that may be an option to help protect that, to keep that either as farming or open space, or that's our strategic forest protection area or conservation value. There's so many other things, but that's where the whole conservation, where we need a robust conservation program that we have bits and pieces, but it hasn't all come together yet. But Sarah's gonna lead that team for us to help get that going.
Oh,
So
wow.
Oh, great, I'm on that team.
Yes, you are. You're gonna
Cool.
probably
You
get
are
an email
there?
from me this week, both of you. Tom, do you remember that you're on that team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Edith Davies.
Yep.
Is she gonna do it?
That's what I'm still working on, is I'm making sure everybody who used to be on it still wants to be on it. And we got a few new people, and my plan is to send something this week to try and get us together this month.
There's the perpetual conflict between
Yeah.
farming. What's a scenic view? Somebody
Right.
might say that farm field on Hickok Road's a scenic view.
It is.
Okay.
It is. There's
well,
nothing
then
like
who's-
seeing
who's-
the
who's
green
gonna
come
build a
up in the
house then?
springtime.
I mean, if
Yeah.
we have to have a balance of interest, a
Right.
balance of
I
interest.
agree with you. I just,
We got enough committees going.
I just feel sorry for the small farmer who, if there are any in this area who are struggling, I can't imagine there aren't any.
yeah, there are.
And I feel bad for old people who don't have the money to live, and that would be their IRA,
They
their
have
farm.
to cash
It
out
is.
to retire,
So-
absolutely. And you're gonna tell them they can't subdivide it into a housing
Exactly,
tract
exactly.
because it's a scenic view or it's prime farmland or whatever you want to throw at it. You have to have a balanced approach.
So how do you write a zoning law
You
that
become God.
accomplishes all that? Whatever that,
That becomes, very, very, so that's why we're focused one step at a time, right? One bite of the apple at a time. So this is very specific to this area, right? And so that's a step that if everybody agrees that could be implemented, that essentially at that point it says, okay, the planning board cannot create a subdivision, a major subdivision in this area unless the town board says it's okay. Essentially, that's basically what this boils down to. That's a step that doesn't exist currently, that really, in some ways, the town board has a lot more leverage than what the planning board has. The planning board, essentially, if it meets all the zoning criteria, they're gonna be hard pressed to not say yes at some point, right? Where the town board, they can be the big bad wolves and they can say, no, we don't want a housing development here. And there's very limited recourse there, right, that somebody could do to the town board. So that's on that piece. What you're talking about is the much bigger piece of the whole entire apple, right? And you've got to have all of these different things. You got to have the overlay, you've got to have the utilities, you've got to have the conservation programs, you've got to have the fiscal ability to do that and offset some of that stuff. That's much more complex, but we can get there. It's more than just zoning because it's also financial. It's probably land bank. It's probably all these other things that we keep talking about that we need to coalesce these programs around so that there's a financial transaction also.
So you're looking at a starting point.
Yes.
Gotcha. Promise you go on to the other stuff.
That's why it needs to. That's why, truthfully, that's why we keep pushing. You saw the little thing that we did when I talked about conservation earlier this year, and we've been looking for somebody to lead the team to get that team going on the conservation stuff. And finally, we twisted Sarah's arm enough that she agreed to do it just to help get it going. So it's definitely needed.
Well, there's this word called no.
Well, yeah, but that's
She's
one of
very
my favorite
passionate.
things to work
We're-
on.
Yeah.
We're juggling some stuff around to free her up to work on this project specifically. So,
I have big ideas.
yes.
The team just has to help find the realistic ones.
Hey, Shauna,
Yes, Bob.
I just want to mention that one thing about solar is solar companies, they're not looking at every single piece of farmland because their location next to the high tension wires have to be a certain distance from that for the solar farms to work efficiently. So they're only looking at actually probably a small group of farms probably. And my goal would be to have an overlay that shows where potentially a solar company would want to come into and then try to mitigate that risk from there.
We could absolutely create that. We could work with the county on that,
I think
Yeah, I need to work with
just to
the,
get a
I
visual.
think you just gotta ask the power company where the substations are and then you.
Yeah,
will know.
I'm sure it's a layer on GIS
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
already listed.
Yes, it's on Encore. I
Yeah.
think.
This substations.
Oh.
I mean, the electric is, but yeah,
They've
we
got
could,
the
I think we could
utility
do
lines,
that.
But they may have additional points where it shows those too. I can't
Yeah.
remember.
I think moving forward, we have to do that. You know, it's part of the future development of what we need to survive in this country.
I mean, solar companies probably already know that.
I'm
where
sure
those
they
are.
do.
Unless they find another ingenious way to produce electricity.
you know, I found really interesting David's briefing he had the other day at training day that he said that New York State has already accomplished the percentage that came out from the state government saying that we need to comply with so much solar. We've already exceeded that. And now we're pushing that level up to another number higher. So yeah, so we've already started to exceed what we've been asked to do already in the state.
Is a lot of that due to residential and that push?
I don't know. I don't know why it's
Or like
due.
solar on people's.
Oh, yeah, I
roofs.
mean, the incentives for solar are incredible, but, yeah, for
Yeah,
residents.
the state is still giving some grants, I think,
Mhm.
for small,
Very small, right?
yeah, under 1,000 square feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Bob DiCarlo, while we have you, I know you have a lot happening. Is there anything else you wanted to state or say before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. Hopefully we can get this more finalized draft put together soon so we can get that looked at and keep moving along with it. I think it's the right direction to go, and we've talked for a long time about this and haven't done anything. So I think we just have to make a step, and we can continue to build on steps like Doug was just saying.
Would the goal be to send this to ordinance soon?
Well, the ag committee first.
I think we're waiting for the ag committee to get back to us from back in November
Yeah.
when Bob was involved and Mr. Emery. Because they had mixed feelings within the ag committee about their regulation or protection.
Yeah, it would go to the ordinance.
You mentioned, what
Yeah, it would go to ordinance when
Yeah.
you're, when the ag's ready to
Yeah.
send it. Okay.
But, you know, Tom just brought up that the property rights is one of the reasons that they're objecting, but,
To the,
There
to
is
the
a
first
s-
version, this
to
is
the
a
first
different.
version, yeah. But there are steps that we can, that Doug can provide them.
Good old Doug.
Well, that's why that we're taking this step, right?
Right. The
So
first
this is,
step.
I mean, I literally am rewriting this thing myself.
Yeah.
And so this is essentially the first one, we might as well throw it in the trash because it was too restrictive in terms of taking away the people's ability to develop their parcels, right? Where this, Bob and I've met a couple of different times and talking about, this is a much, what I would say, softer approach. But it does give the town board specifically the ability to prevent a housing development from going in a specific
Right,
area.
and because the town board is an elected group,
Yes,
they should be following the
comprehensive plan.
comprehensive
Mm.
plan
Right.
and also the wishes of the population. So.
They have to take that, that's why they have that huge burden, but they have to balance all
We
that,
have to have
right?
every confidence in them that they will do that.
And remember, the wishes of the population is not always the people that,
No,
Right,
I
right,
understand that.
allow
I
us.
absolutely understand that.
and that's
Yeah.
a difficult place.
I know,
that
and that's
the
why
town
we're here.
boards and
That's why we're here. you know,
But this
to-
idea seems in
to try
line with our
to,
comp plan and our
understand.
priorities.
But I think
Absolutely.
if we take a step like what we're proposing to put the approval in the hands of the town board, we can come up with other steps to encourage the town board to take that seriously and to, I don't know what they are, but Doug does.
One step at a time. right?
That's right. That's right. It's a step forward and you know, the masses usually rule. And according to that map, the masses rule and we should be supporting them at this point.
All right.
I've got to
Thank you.
jump off now. You guys
Yes.
don't have questions for me, so thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks,
Bob.
Thank you,
Bob.
Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Bob LaCourse, thank you for coming today as well.
If I
No
could
problem.
mention our ag committee, and I know Bob had to run there, but you know, so many of the applications that come in when there's impact to agriculture or farmland or even the ag districts, the ag committee reviews that with Sarah and they really do take that job seriously is how I would say it. They look at the soils, they provide a very detailed, Sarah provides a very detailed response relative to the soil classifications so that the planning board can make a decision. But, you know, planning board
Yeah,
members, and I know there's a couple of you on the Zoom call, please know that the ag committee is spending a lot of time and giving it a lot of thought when they're making a recommendation to you.
Yeah, I
relative.
sit with them when they talk about it and these guys know soil. So they want me to show them what soils are there and they say, oh yeah, that's a good one. Or, oh no, that's terrible. I don't know how they're growing anything on that. You know, so I mean, they really look at it and they want to know who it is. Like, oh, I know him. He does this and that. I mean, they look at the ins and outs and everything of the farm operation that might be impacted. And they provide really thoughtful answers. And they're really practical too. I mean, if they think, oh, well, it's just a house, it's not gonna matter. It's just a neighboring parcel that's gonna build a house. That's not gonna impact the farm, as long as they know it's gonna be stinky, you know, stuff like that.
But I've
But if
also heard
it's
them
something
talk
bigger-
about, like, even though it may just be a house, right? It may limit access because of the
Yes.
width of
Oh,
the plow.
so
So
they
they
do
really go
get-
into that level of detail and think about
They
that.
do get really, I
Technically.
don't wanna say upset, but they
Passionate.
do have concerns when it's going to restrict a farmer's access to his field. And they want certain width of space allowed for them to get in there with their big equipment. A former member, one of his passions is when the fields are getting more separated by roads and driveways and They're used to going between fields sometimes,
Mhm.
between a cut through, and if that parcel's now developed, they have to go around and they have to be on the road with their equipment. That really bothered some of our previous members. So I mean, they look at everything. So when they provide that report back to the planning board, it's pretty comprehensive.
So is that mandated in the ag committee review of
So
potential?
yes, our code and the process in the development office has a list of criteria that if certain boxes are checked, that the ag committee is required to review that application and provide their comments back to the planning board.
And the ag committee itself is actually in town code. So like, for instance, the
Yes.
That's what I mean.
CIC
That's what I mean.
was created by resolution, but the Parks and Rec Committee and the Ag Committee, those specific two committees are per town code of the town of Canandaigua.
And that's their marching orders, implement the ag plan and review documents to ensure that it's not a major loss of viable agriculture. We see that phrase a lot. So if there's someone doing farming and it's like that solar example on Monks Road was a really great example. Yes, there was some agricultural happening on that field, but the ag committee and the owner himself admitted it really wasn't practical, viable, wasn't working very well. It was causing a lot of erosion, and putting solar panels on it was probably actually going to do better to protect the soils on that land than actually putting corn on it. So, sometimes it's not viable, and they'll say so.
And it gave him the revenue to help subsidize the rest of his farming.
So he can, still continue to do farming.
That's a fact of life if a small farmer is going to stay in business.
So there are already some checks and balances.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And there will be more.
Possibly. Yeah.
I mean, the Ag Committee is very concerned about this. They also are very passionate about public education relative to agriculture, and also getting into the schools and education relative to the schools and what that means, so that hopefully there's continued interest in farming. I mean, if we do nothing and we just let everything develop, right, the farmland will eventually be gone and you won't have farming in the town of Canandaigua. So it's about finding the balance, right? Checks and balance.
That's one reason why workforce development has the program for high school juniors every year to experience hands-on type professions versus college educated professions. And it's a very worthy program. I would like to see it expanded to.
And I think it's third graders
I
in
was just
Canandaigua
gonna
visit
say.
Bob's farm.
I mean, the
And
bus
that's
drives
every
right
year.
through Bob's barn. That's just like the coolest thing that we've done.
Yeah, but this is a countywide,
Yeah.
actually, it's a 3 countywide effort. And I've actually had volunteered at it, and it's a worthy effort. I am amazed at what these young people come out of it, and to the point where they ask to be able to come again, but it's limited. There's a limited amount of people.
Well, in promotion of farmland in the town of Canandaigua, I would say throughout the Finger Lakes, this is some of the best land.
Yeah.
Not only in New York State, but in the country. So losing farmland is,
Yates County, yes.
Oh, I'm well aware of it. I come from northern Illinois, which is farmland. You know, you
Right,
get
for
60 miles outside of
forever.
Chicago, and that's all that's there. And it ranges all the way from northern Illinois through the state of Iowa, which can feed the world with the corn they produce. So, I grew up knowing that farmland was important, and it still is.
But in this area, there's a lot of nostalgia tied up with
With
farming.
farms, I know.
But as a practical matter, and we've been through, when I've been involved with the town, 3 different comprehensive plans, and every time we do a tally of how much open land is being farmed and how much is vacant and how much is, what's the other classification? The number of acres actively farmed, and that means economically farmed, continues to diminish. And we have to face that fact that we don't have the economies of scale
No,
to
we
make
don't.
farming
We don't.
an economically viable occupation in
You're
all but
absolutely
maybe
right.
5 or 6 farms in this town.
I hear that at my county board that I'm on, and, you know, it all comes, it
we
all
know
comes
that,
down to supporting farm-related activities, and that includes things like dairy and the sale of dairy products, having Star Cider, for example, it's related to farm. Supporting all those type of activities that you make usage of farm products, that's really important, that's what's important.
You know,
But
and the-
we're here at the bottom level, and we need to support the farms.
And it's not just the big farms. I had a really long conversation with, I can't remember what his title is, but David Bame at Ag and Markets is our main contact when we do our farmland conservation programs. And after talking to him, it seems like, you know, they always had focused on big giant farms, saving as much acreage as they can, and that's still important to them. But what I was interested in is that they're also now shifting to look at smaller acreage, maybe 15 acres and a house, because they see that, you know, the future of farm stands isn't going anywhere. More and more people are getting interested in it, and they want to support that because it's feeding your neighbors, you know? And so they made some big changes to the programs we've used for the PDRs in the past, which made it a little more complicated, but it is more supportive of some of those smaller operations. And so they're looking, just like farmers themselves, the state's looking to diversify its farmland protection to include everybody from, you know, a huge corn farmer down to someone
The
who's
benefit
growing
farms,
broccoli and
yeah.
apples and, you know,
Right.
peppers and selling them at the farm market.
Doug and I have another meeting, so we're gonna have to wrap it up. Thank you all for coming today.
So do we?
I think this was some good-
do You put together a. Is it a law, a town code that puts this into the hands of the town board?
Yeah.
It's an evolving draft.
Will this be at the next town board meeting?
No, it will not be.
Maybe
This will
in
be at the
June?
next
July, June.
Ag committee meeting, no.
Which
Yeah.
is
I
next
think we
Thursday.
need direction from the Ag Advisory Committee, and they were reviewing the code.
I imagine they will talk about it at their meeting, which is next Thursday, the 12th. And then if they come to a consensus, they would then want the ordinance committee to approve it and send it on to the board. So yeah, the town board wouldn't see this for another few months. I think the earliest that the ordinance committee would see it is June, earliest, maybe July. So this would be later.
But it is in the process.
Yes, yes, and it has been, and yes, it's been a while, but it's because, like Doug said, that first draft was to get them started, and they decided it was too restrictive, and the ordinance committee agreed. So then they went back to the ag committee, and they've been kind of working back and forth to try and find the sweet spot that seems to make the most sense, and I think they're close.
Good, we've accomplished something. That's great.
Yeah,
Slowly.
slowly,
Very
but it
slowly.
works.
That's progress. Moves slower than snail.
And you know, Karen, you know, you were talking about, you know, the smaller farmers who are looking to retire, and, you know, the most financially feasible option for them would be to sell it to someone who wants to develop it, because it
Yes.
gives them their biggest bang for their buck. But I feel like there's a lot of young people who can't afford to buy farmland who would like to farm, maybe not a lot, but I know people who want to do that. And there's programs out there that are trying to connect those two people. And there are incentives, but that's one of my things, is we need to find out what it is.
Information out. to
Exactly.
those People.
It exists, but it's not the easiest thing to find if someone knows to go looking for it. Like our local USDA office has information on some of
One
that
of the
stuff.
ways to do that is to get the information out to the farmers, because
Yes.
many of those people work on farms
And they
and
don't.
they know they can't afford to
No.
purchase.
Well, so
a
like,
farm.
for example, people like Bob, he knows all these things. He knows all the people at the ag office. He knows like the USDA people. He knows all those, but right. Someone
Yeah.
who's not interested in computers, he's at retirement age, probably doesn't know about any of these programs.
Well, you
and-
know, Brian Young.
No. Oh, wait, from the county. Yeah.
County, his son worked at Old Dutch, or whatever it is, Dutch, half Dutch farm. in Clifton. And he's not going to go to college. He wants a farm.
Mhm.
But how do you convince a young person like that, that there are programs that can help you, not just learn about it, but purchase a farm when the time
Right.
comes?
Well, I don't know
So
if
you
you know,
might want
but
to go to high schools too.
Bob
and,
DiCarlo ended up with John Nope in a partnership because he started working at his farm when he was younger.
Hmm.
And it turned into,
Yeah.
John Nope's succession plan, which worked wonderfully for them. But it's, you stumble into things like that, but I wish it wasn't just stumbling into it. I wish we had, I don't know, yeah, I wish there was a better way to get the information to the people who need it.
Well, I wish people viewed farming as a profession, not just something that happens to you. You grow up on a farm, you
I
take
think it
over the
depends on
farm.
what people are used to seeing as a farm, I
Yes.
mean, you look at these big dairy farms, it's definitely professionally run. And some smaller farms you drive by and there's just some corn in a field, people don't see it that way. Even though we know that's not true.
I've taken people on tours of the Hemdale dairy portion of his farm, which is eye-opening to
Yeah.
see the technology that,
Fun on the farms
yeah,
is
yeah.
one of the best ways to show people what
But-
goes into a dairy
But
farm.
this was a group of people from another country
Oh,
where
yeah.
farming was much more respected than it is in our country. But to see the head herdsman from another country look at the wall of computers at Hemdale Farms was an amazing thing,
Yeah.
It's an eye opener. It's an eye opener. We need, the information is there. It needs to get out.
Oh, yeah, we don't need to record anymore. Sorry. We're just chatting now, but I think we're pretty much done, you guys. Sorry.
All boils down to economics, though. The person that wants to start out, that's in love with farming, cannot possibly afford the land
No.
because the capitalized value is development,
Exactly.
or a solar farm is more